Super Rugby round 2, that's quite the set of results. Not all of these went according to plan, and some of the ones that did, perhaps the margins didn't reflect like what the prediction said they would. It's good though. I mean, at the end of this round, I think there's only 4 teams who are unbeaten, and one of those was on the bye. So, yeah, maybe we've got a bit of parity returning to Super Rugby. Happy days. We'll see how things go. We'll start with the first one. The Waratahs getting the result over the Sunwolves. Just 31 points to 30. For the Sunwolves, it was tries to Van den Heever, 2 and 2 Tom Rowe. Is his name Tom? Pretty sure. For the Waratahs, it was Beale, 2 to Falau, Dempsey, and a penalty try. And yeah, it was definitely no walk in the park for the Waratahs for this one. I think they were kind of expected to go in there and yeah, really take control of the game. But they never really... I mean, the lead changed 3 times, so they never really just went out and dominated. The Sunwolves were a lot better in Japan. And I suppose the fact that I think that Waratahs pack is probably a wee bit smaller than what we saw from the Sharks last week. Perhaps that also suited the Sunwolves game style a wee bit more. But yeah, in terms of the stats, it was actually a pretty good effort from the Sunwolves. They tackled at 83%, made 114 tackles compared to the Waratahs, who were at 70% in 53. So yeah, defensively the Waratahs aren't there, and if they're playing better teams, they're going to concede a fair few points. But I suppose, you know, they still scored a bunch of tries, so they can't be too downhearted. There was definitely a much better crowd at this one in Japan than we saw in Singapore, and they were treated to a proper game. There was a bit of a breeze. Sunwolves seemed to be playing with it in the first half. So, yep, that was another thing for guys to deal with. There were some good moments. I mean, Rona looked like he'd pretty much blown a really clear and obvious try at the start of the game, but there was kind of Masarewa defensively helped slap the ball out of his hands, so that was good. The Sunwolves managed to get a tight head on the Waratahs scrum, so again, that's a step up from last week. But both sides had a few loose hands. You know, Hayden Parker had a break which they weren't able to convert on. One of the Tars tries, I thought the pass to Falau looked a wee bit forward. Didn't get called back. I think they did have a look at it and decided it was flat, so I guess that's fine. I suppose you give the benefit of the doubt to the attacking team. But yeah, they missed the drop goal right at the end, the Sunwolves. Hayden Parker, who's the guy who I think won a game against the Stormers last season with a drop goal, wasn't able to get it done with the drop goal this time, but credit to Carmichael Hunt, because he seemed to put just enough pressure on him that Hayden kind of kicked a little bit left to avoid the Hunt coming in from the right, and the kick ended up fading out left. So very close in the final minutes. It could have been a Sunwolves win. Not to be. It's encouraging that the Sunwolves didn't get smashed, or you could say it's discouraging that the top team from the Australian Conference last year only just squeaked through with a 1-point win. Either way, it was an entertaining game. Much like that Highlanders and Reds game, the bookies had it as being a bit of a landslide and ended up being quite a close game. So, yeah, that was encouraging. Eddie Quirk went off on a stretcher, which was a bit disappointing, though. The Sunwolves go to the Chiefs next week in New Zealand, and the Waratahs are on the bye. So, it doesn't get any easier for the Sunwolves. Waratahs a wee bit to work on. The next one, Crusaders 38, Hurricanes 22. And this one was 24-0 at halftime. The Crusaders, who picked probably a stronger starting lineup than the Hurricanes, did an absolute job on the Hurricanes at the start of this game. The Hurricanes just weren't in it. I mean, they were getting absolutely dominated. The run meters at halftime was 355 to 52. Yeah, possession territory was like 70+% to the Crusaders. Tackling percent for the Hurricanes was at 64. So they were absolutely under the pump. And the Crusaders, after about, was it about an hour or a little bit earlier, they started taking off some of the big guns. And from there, we really started to see the Hurricanes kind of get back into the game, and the Hurricanes brought on some of their guys who perhaps should have been starting, but the Hurricanes management decided not to start, and then suddenly they looked a better team. I mean, you look at the timings of all these scores. I mean, look at the Crusaders, 9th minute, 24, 27, 40, 43, and then one last one at 77. But for the Hurricanes, it's all pretty late. Apart from Ben Lamb at 48, it's then 67, 80, and then well into injury time, 84. So, yeah, the Hurricanes look better with their guns on. It would have been nice to see kind of both teams start full strength, but not to be. I suppose, if nothing else, the Hurricanes, by that little late comeback, did deny the Crusaders a bonus point. I'm not sure how important that'll be given how far ahead the Crusaders finished last year. It may not make a difference, but given that they were 24-0 down at halftime, the fact that they did that at least gives them a bit of respectability. And yeah, they don't go into the next week with their heads as down as possibly they could be. Mataele went off after his setup for one of those tries was just magic. Like, he was legs in the air over the sideline, but proper bit of magic in that game. Jordy Barrett looked like he'd hurt his knee, but he seemed to keep on playing. Some people have accused the Hurricanes of kind of throwing that game with their selections to start with, but I know each team's managing their All Blacks in different ways, so perhaps going to Christchurch and getting a victory was never on the cards. I don't know, but yep, there were certainly a few good tries in that one. I would say, though, if you wanted pure entertainment, you'd probably go with that Sunwolves Waratahs game, because the Crusaders won. For much of the game was really one-sided, and then the Hurricanes kind of piped in right at the end, but it was too little too late, so the result was never really in doubt. Next one, and I wasn't planning on watching all of this one because the Six Nations was on early in the morning in New Zealand, and this was on late at night, so it started at like 9 something. I was thinking, I'll watch the start. The Chiefs are going to get ahead, and then when they've kind of got the game in the bag, I'll just go to bed in the knowledge that they're going to win. 54-17. Oh my lord, what a result. My son's yelling because he's also excited for the Brumbies, man. If I had Brumbies gear, I would definitely be wearing a Brumbies jersey, because 54-17, I don't know anybody that predicted that. Tries to Kurandrani, 2, Banks got 1, Penny got 2, McCaffrey got 1, Falafanga got 1, and Josh Manray got 1. Whew, lots of tries. Wakiola and Takiaho for the Chiefs. 54-17, a massive result for the Brumbies after a really disappointing home loss to the Rebels last week. And the Chiefs, this is a second disappointing result in a row. After losing to the Highlanders at home last week, they've now gone across the ditch and gotten absolutely hammered. So no talk at the moment of that kind of great divide between the Aussie and New Zealand conferences, with the Reds pushing the Highlanders pretty hard. But again, we're 2 weeks into the season, so no one's drawing any massive conclusions there. Chiefs had a fair bit of game early, but the Brumbies got their offload game going, which is kind of what you expect to see from the Chiefs. The Brumbies used some variation in their game this week. Instead of just always going from a driving maul from their line-out play, they actually showed, some set plays where they would get the ball out, which was nice and I suppose a bit harder to defend. Brumbies scrum seemed to get on top a few times as well, which is encouraging for them. But yeah, there were some pretty magic tries. Like Banks made Sean Stevenson look pretty silly with his try. He just hit a gap and left, right, went round him like he was kind of stuck in the mud. McCaffrey's try came from a pretty big scrum, so yeah, this was a proper good game. Brumbies of old, 54 points, big bonus point win. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, man. I had to watch the whole game because I was half expecting like the Brumbies to fall apart and the Chiefs to finally find it, but the Brumbies did not take their foot off the throat. Unlike this Crusaders game where they seemed to kind of ease off at the end, the Brumbies just kept on hammering, because that earlier game probably could have gone further out like this one ended up going, but man, the Brumbies were slick. They scored on the 77th minute after a big maul. Kurandrani went straight through. This is what I mean, like 77th minute, they just didn't, 78th, they didn't stop playing. But yeah, Banks showed some wheels. Liliafano ran the ball a fair bit, which was really encouraging to see if you're a Brumbies fan. Brumbies ran a lot of ball in their own 22, which was especially surprising. It's kind of not what we expect from them, but where to the Chiefs from here? McKenzie didn't look all that sharp. He threw a couple of forward passes and whatnot, so I still think they'll come right, but they're none from two, which I would not have picked at the start of the season. Yeah, anybody who picked this one on Super Brew, especially with that margin, is a bit of a legend. The Brumbies are away to the Hurricanes next week, so it's another New Zealand team, but they'll take some confidence. The Chiefs have got the Sunwolves at home, which will either be a nice way to get their season underway after a couple of failed weeks, or an all-new low. We will see. I can't imagine. Wow, not going to go there. The next one was the Blues against the Sharks. I didn't see this one. It was on at about 2 in the morning here. As the Six Nations was on this morning, though, they did show a replay of this, so I kind of had both on at the same time. And I saw much of it. It seemed to be pretty, well, I don't want to say dire, but at times it didn't seem all that free-flowing. The Sharks had a whole lot of ball in the Blues half for long periods. They went into halftime, I think, was it 19-0? After tries to Fussy, Vandermerwe, and Rob de Prea. The Blues got one back, Telea, and yeah, Bosch got an intercept right at the end. Like, the Sharks had a yellow card. Blues didn't score any points during that period. It was all Sharks. Well, not all Sharks, but Blues were on attack. And Sharks are the ones who ended up scoring the points from there. So, yeah, I saw Nkosi go off on a stretcher. Hopefully he's okay. He kind of gestured to the crowd that he looked alright. But, yeah, 26-7 is not an ideal result if you're a Blues fan like myself. I kind of semi-expected it. I didn't think that they would be able to really back up that pretty good performance against the Crusaders last week. Sharks at home were always going to be tough, although both sides travelled. So the Sharks had to travel back from Singapore, so there's no real difference there. They both had to move a whole lot of time zones to get this one. So, yeah, the Sharks are doing pretty well. 2 wins from 2. Bonus points in both games. But the only thing I will say, not to put a kind of dampener on things if you're a Sharks fan, but the 2 teams you've played finished 15th and 14th last season. I know we kind of give the Blues a bit too much credit because they're a New Zealand team. Like, New Zealand teams are good, but the Blues are bad. Your brain still kind of thinks, well, it's a New Zealand team, they might be able to get a victory. Blues probably still not there yet, even though they had a pretty good showing last week. Yeah, 26-7. Good results for the Sharks. They've got the Stormers at home next week, and the Stormers don't travel well, so you'd have to back the Sharks to keep on their run. The Blues move again across to Argentina, so it's not going to get easier for them because, yeah, as you can see on the board, the Jaguares had a pretty good win over the Bulls. We'll get to that in a minute. The next one, the Stormers actually managed to win. And I saw the end of this one. I've seen a replay of most of the game. I was a bit confused because I watched the end of the game live as England and Wales was on. And then this was like the death of this game, like the last 5 minutes. And it was all Stormers camped in the Lions half, getting advantage and going for scrums. And yeah, I was a bit confused because when I watched the replay, not the replay, but the highlights, the start of the game was a different team because they were wearing a totally different jersey, but they were both wearing the superhero jerseys, and there seemed to be a bit of a clash, so they did a sensible thing and switched the jerseys, although more sensible would have been to plan that out before the game started. But hey, whatever it did, whatever they did by changing jerseys seemed to make a difference for the Stormers because they came back from 14-6 down at half-time. There were tries to Cocker Smith and Warren Whiteley. And just through the boot of SP Maria, they managed to kind of get closer and closer to the Lions. And then well past that full-time mark, Herschel Yankees went over. Nice little sniping run from the back of a scrum, which looked like they'd stuffed it up because the ball popped out the back and he just zipped round and touched it to the base of the post. Try was good. Kick was good. And yeah, the Stormers get a win. So, and I should mention the Lions had a yellow card during that period too, but good victory, man. Totally turn around from what they did last week when they got absolutely hammered by the Bulls. So they're not as bad as all that. Much like the Sunwolves last week, they're not that bad. The Brumbies, with their result, they weren't that bad. So there's a lot of teams that are showing, don't judge us by one result. And the Stormers just need to figure out how to switch this up on the road is their biggest problem. But yeah, it seemed like a bit of a messy game at times from what limited amount I've seen. But you've still got to give credit to the Stormers for getting that result done. The Lions will be pretty gutted to throw away that big a lead against a conference rival. But if nothing else, they pick up a bonus point. So yeah, the Lions have got the Bulls over in Joburg next week, so that'll be a good one, a good rivalry between those two teams, just up the road from each other. And the Stormers travel away to Durban to face the Sharks. So as I said, getting over those kind of travel woes, even if it's domestic travel, they still need to get it done because last season they didn't manage it once. We'll see if this is their chance. Lastly, the Jaguares against the Bulls. I watched this one in full. It was pretty dire at times. Again, rain. It seemed to be pretty wet. There wasn't that much of a crowd for it, but I suppose part of that is to do with the weather. It seemed really wet. Handling was pretty atrocious. It was 7-3 at halftime? Yeah, just the one try in the first half to Orlando. I've forgotten the O from his name. Apologies. Let's put that on now. Orlando. And yeah, the Bulls didn't end up scoring any. It was just the boot of Pollard. Although he and Bonija both missed kicks. Bonija missed a fair few. Pollard missed at least one penalty. Not like last week where he was in kind of absolute control. But yeah, 7-3 at halftime. The Bulls did manage to take the lead at one point. They went up to 12 points to 10. But then from about 60 minutes onwards, the Jaguares stepped things up. Managed to score a couple of tries to Bruni and Dalgi. Dalgi's one was on the counter. And yeah, it's a win. That's kind of the only upset that I managed to pick in my Super Brew this week because I certainly didn't see the Brumbies beating the Chiefs. And yeah, all the others. Oh, I didn't pick the Stormers either. So yeah, I thought the Jaguares might be better at home. I wasn't convinced by the Bulls last week that they would be able to maintain this performance level. Perhaps it was the weather, or perhaps they're still a team. Maybe it was the travel, or perhaps they're still kind of figuring out where they're at. They still need to gel, a new coach, a bunch of new players. So it's kind of not all that surprising that the Jaguares, who are a largely stable team, albeit with a new coach, who've not had to travel over the week, managed to get the better end of it. Although, again, neither team was that slick. Neither team will be happy with it. It was a ton of handling errors. The Bulls' scrum was under a wee bit of pressure, although even they managed to force some penalties from the Jaguares too. So, yeah, both scrums were messy, and both kickers missed kicks. There was some handbags. Vermeulen was getting annoyed. Especially when I think it was Bruni's try got scored. Someone was all over his head and he didn't like it. And yeah, it was probably the least pretty game to watch. But again, it was probably the worst weather, so that kind of makes sense. Good for the Jaguares to get a win. There's, as I said, very few teams now, just a handful which are unbeaten. And yeah, everyone's got points. Nobody's on 0. So the Jaguares were the final team to pick up points. Sunwolves picked up losing bonus points. The Blues have picked up losing bonus point last week. So Stormers managed to get a win. A bunch of teams who didn't do that well last week managed to up their game. The Jaguares can consider themselves among those. Just where the Bulls are at remains to be seen. It doesn't get any easier for them having to travel back to South Africa now to face the Lions. Jaguares host the Blues. So I'd have to be back in the Jaguares here with the Blues doing all this travel, but you do never know. What did you guys think of these games? Did you get any of them right in Super Brew? Did you pick any of the upsets? If you know any of the attendance of these games, do let me know, because I am kind of trying to keep a track of how things are going with the attendances. They do not always announce it, which is pretty frustrating. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the games. Key moments, key players who you were impressed by, and yeah, I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.